Podcast 1, A New Beginning. Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of our podcast series, Second Chances, a journey of survival and self-discovery. I'm Liz Wells, and today we're starting with a story of survival. It's hard to believe that just over a year ago, my life nearly ended. What followed was a year-long process of healing, both physically and emotionally, as I tried to make sense of what had happened and what comes after such a life-altering experience. We often hear stories about surviving the impossible, but what happens when you get that second chance? How do you rebuild when everything has been stripped away? Let's talk about that today, about facing the reality of life after survival and the journey to finding a new beginning. Sat here talking to you now, it's almost impossible to believe that my life was so nearly over. It's taken me over a year to just start processing what happened. When faced with serious illness and the very real possibility of death, everything else fades into the background. Worries, problems, they all become distant and seemingly unimportant. Each day becomes about one thing: surviving. Just making it to the next day alive. When every ounce of energy is focused on keeping your body going, there's no room for anything else. I reached a point in my illness where all I could do was concentrate on the moment. Thinking beyond that felt like giving up. I had to pour everything I had into staying alive. It became about survival and nothing else. Then, I was given a second chance, a life-saving liver transplant. In those months that followed, I was on an emotional roller coaster. Physically, I was healing from major surgery, but as time passed, new complications appeared, things I'd likely have to live with for the rest of my life, but none of it compared to facing death every day. I was alive, but I knew the road to recovery would be long. When you've been in a battle, praying and hoping for an end to a nightmare, and you finally get that answer, the relief is overwhelming. The nightmare is over. But then what? What happens on the other side of survival? When your entire existence has been focused on escaping a life-threatening situation, it's hard, almost impossible, to think about the future. I found myself in a strange place. I was grateful to be alive, but I was also in a kind of no man's land. I don't think that you can go through such a massive life event and be the same afterwards. People were so happy I was alive, asking me what I was going to do now, what dreams I wanted to fulfill. There was an unspoken expectation that life would just go back to normal. But it couldn't. I'd faced death. I'd wrestled with it for months. There were times I even begged for it to come and end the suffering. How could I go back to how things were? And go back to what? Everything had changed. My perspective, my relationships, even how I saw myself. People who I thought would always be there had, for their own reasons, stepped away. They couldn't cope with the chaos that surrounded me. Some people just walked away from the pain. I had so desperately wanted to live when I was dying, but now, with death no longer at my door, what was next? I began to realise that my journey wasn't over. The physical battle was done, but now came the mental, emotional and spiritual battles. I'd been stripped down in every area of my life, and now I had to rebuild. And that's the journey I want to take you on with me. Support groups can be incredibly helpful, but they often focus on the event, the illness, the divorce, the loss. But what happens after? How do you move on when you've been through something life-altering? I knew that what had happened was huge, but I didn't want it to define me. I had so many questions, and at times I felt overwhelmed. Who was I? Who had I been? Who was I now? Who did I want to become? And why was I still here? I needed to find purpose again. But first, I had to find answers. I needed to process not just my recent trauma, but all the pain I'd carried throughout my life. And so, the process began. First by looking back, then by accepting where I was. Only then could I begin to move forward, into my future, into my new life. Thank you for joining me on this first step of what I hope will be a meaningful journey for both of us. A new beginning is about just that, starting over after trauma. When the life you knew no longer exists, and you're left to create something new. If this resonated with you or sparked any thoughts, I'd love to hear your stories too. Remember, healing isn't just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, and personal. So, let's walk this path together. Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep moving forward. There's more to come, and I'm excited to see where this journey will take us.